Okay, give it a couple seconds. Let me see what I've got going on here. Isn't it fun to do a first round of anything?
Always, yeah.
Okay. Oh, there we go. And we should be live. Okay. So, hey, everybody. I want to introduce you to my very, very good friend, Jacob. Jacob is here today with me, and we're going to have a low tea, which is because we're not very fancy. It's also the name of what we've decided our retirement dream bookshop will be. So I'm here. I got my tea. I'm drinking some Moroccan mint. Jacob, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi guys, I'm Jacob. I like to read books quite a bit, so here I am, right? I'm drinking this wonderful spruce tea that I got from Finland. It's a great black tea with spruce nettle in it, so fun time.
That's so fancy, spruce nettle. So we both this week happened to read Children of Blood and Bone by Tome Adeyemi. Words are hard today. I'm so glad it's Thursday. Yes, he's got it there. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And we were both really excited. We'd both been talking about it before it came out and then managed to get it when it came out, of course, because, bookstores aren't hard. So, Jacob, you want to give us an overview? What's the book about?
Yeah, so I was really excited that we were going to be reading this book, that it came out and that I got through it so quickly. It is about four young individuals that are trying to navigate their way through a land where magic has been stripped from all of the old practitioners, and they are now forced to live basically as the lowest of low classes, horribly discriminated against, and definitely abused by the system that they're living in. And we follow the story chiefly of, I'm going to say this name horribly, Zele and Amari, who are two young women on opposite sides at the beginning of the book, on opposite sides of this power struggle. Zele is a young girl that should have had magic all of her life, but didn't, and had to grow up with discrimination and a lot of hatred. And Amari is the princess of the kingdom that's in power.
Yeah. So it's a let's see here. It is really fantastic to read. I think there's a lot of really interesting subtext that's going on with this story. It, of course, has a lot of class struggle and power struggle, but also deals with a lot of the conversation around if you did get power and you've been oppressed, what do you do with it? Which is I think a really pertinent question. It's a conversation that I think is often not talked about. And it's kind of that like Black Panther Wakanda talk, right? Like now that we have all the power, what is our job to do with it? And I kind of love that. I Huh? Go ahead.
I think the interesting dynamic, though, because Wakanda is a good example, is that we're really looking at, if you want to extend the metaphor, a Wakanda resurgence, right? Where the people of Wakanda would have been without their technology and their power, and they're suddenly now finding themselves not only in a position where they're far ahead of their peers, but they're far ahead of where they expected themselves to be yesterday. And so now they have to figure out what they're going to be and what kind of person they want to be. And that's the struggle that Zele and her brother, who's the other chief protagonist from that side of the struggle, have to deal with.
Yeah. I think that another really interesting aspect to that is that it's not just what do you do now that you have power. It's kind of what do you do in reaction to not just oppression, but very violent oppression. So at the very beginning of the story, we find out that Zele's family, when the power was taken away, when the magic was taken away, her family suffered from this really big loss, which is that actual like men from the guards came in and like dragged her mother out of the house in these magic restricting chains and hung her up in the middle of the town, like physically hung her up to die. And so there's not just an element of like, how do I be good in this with all of this power? It's like, how do I pursue justice in the face of really terrible wrongs that have happened systemically?
What does justice even mean for me if I've been in a position where I've never had any?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I thought that was really interesting. Like the entire background of power dynamics and class struggle is so fascinating in this book. And it's fun to watch. It's fun to watch both. Oh gosh, I'm having a moment. It's
Amari?
Yes, I'm sorry. It's fun to Jacob unfortunately has to see me at like all of my most brain fart moments. But AMA
I'm just a brain decoder, it's fine.
To watch her and also her brother Inan, who's another kind of not quite main character, but not main character, have to realize what's been going on and have kind of this similar struggle from the opposite side, where they're trying to learn how to empathize with people, particularly because their father, who is very cruel, was not a kind father to them either.
There's one part early when you're learning about Anand's and Amari's relationship where they talk about, you notice that Amari has these horrible scars on her back. And you find out that her brother had given them to her. And then much later in the book, you find out that he had given them to her in a sword fight when they were very, very young, that their father was forcing them to go through. And as much as you're supposed to dislike their father, and he's a very loathsome character, you also felt a little sorry for him too, because he's definitely acting out of a place of abject fear. He lost his family, whether it's true or not, we never really know, to wizards, which led him on this quest to get magic out of the world entirely. And every step that he took got more and more violent and despicable, and it all came from this fear of this fear of someone taking things away from him. And I think ultimately it cost him everything by the end of the book.
Yeah, for sure. By the end of the book, both his children have basically turned against him. He's like clearly losing power. He wasn't successful at what he originally wanted to do, which is get rid of the magic. And he's just this very cold person. Like he's ruined a lot of his relationships. The one relationship that he did have that was fairly successful was cut short real fast at the beginning of the book, and goes to feed into some of his anger again. And it's just this cycle of like, when you are cruel to someone and they fight back and you perceive that as a threat, so you become more cruel, and how that can kind of just ruin everything. It's very sad.
And as much as Zélie and her brother fear the ruler, rightfully so, from a distance, it was an interesting dynamic in the book because Amari and Inan fear this ruler from a very personal place. I mean, a lot of Inan's struggle through the book, and again, like Bree said, he was not necessarily a chief protagonist, but he was there throughout all of the book, is this struggle where he has suddenly found that now he has magic, and he's trying to hide it from everybody that knows about him.
Yeah.
And definitely from his father, because even though he wants to think that his father would stand by him, he's not sure. And at the end of the book, it turns out that no, his father will not stand by him, even though he's done all of these things himself to try to eliminate magic and do what his father wanted.
And it's a very explicit conversation. Zélie points it out to Inan real fast that, like, what do you think that just because you're his son that he's going to see what he sees as evil in you and he's going to see it as different because he loves you? Because she points out really fast, like, that's not the case. And I mean, that echoes so many relationships I think that you see in real life. Sorry, I have a kitty here. He's He's a cuddle buddy.
You know, I think one of the things that helped drive the pace of the book and kind of helped us learn about Anan was that for most of the book, Anan and Zele spend at least a chunk of time pulling Rey and Kylo Ren and force Skyping across distance. Like they're definitely talking to each other in this weird magical mind palace that suddenly connects the two of them when they both get their magic at the beginning of the book. And Zele is real quick to be like, oh, you know what? You stay away from me because I can tell everybody that you have magic. That's not going to go well for you. And that helps drive part of the antagonist relationship with them for at least the good first half of the book. It definitely adds a level of suspense to Anan's whole arc, because now not only does he have to worry about his personal struggle of, can I capture these people and recover the artifacts that they've stolen that they're trying to use to bring back magic? And can I keep it a secret? And how do I shut this girl up so that she doesn't tell everybody that I'm suddenly a wizard too?
Mm-hmm. There is this real big tell with like physical appearance. When you have magic or the potential for magic, you have white hair, right? And Anan gets this big streak of white hair that he's like basically covering with the like mascara to try and have it be dark enough to pass. And it's really interesting.
And very only he was wearing a helmet for a lot of time, and I thought that was a funny element of his story because a couple people commented on, why are you still wearing a helmet? Like, what's going on? And the person that was calling him on this was the king's mistress, and like this person that Anan had known for all of his life, and I think was actually pretty close to as well, that suddenly becomes an antagonist to him, quite suddenly and quite brutally, that he actually ends up killing her, and that's guilt starts becoming a larger driving force for Anan, I think, for the rest of the book than anything else.
Mm-hmm. I think my real struggle with this story, and Jacob and I were talking about this a little bit before we started this, is that there's so much going on. The entire story takes place in the course of like a week. But where with a lot of books, and specifically a lot of fantasy books, right? A lot of like high fantasy where the magic is the point of the book. It is a lot of world building. It is a lot of story and plot development. And this was almost too fast. I would have accepted like 2 or 3 books out of this. The world building in it, I think, suffers a little bit. And you can tell that Adeyemi like thought through all of the different stuff that she wanted to be a part of this world, right? Like she definitely has thought through nuances of how this world works, but we don't get to see it. So that was difficult.
I feel like she kind of had the reverse problem that George R.R. Martin has with his books. Like he spends so much time going into so much detail about all of the characters and the settings and the commerce and what they're wearing and like whose family is what family, that it just becomes this big drag on the book. And similarly, Adeyemi had this wonderfully imaginative world that she's built. And the bits of it that we see are well constructed, are imaginative, and make you want to learn more, which is great. It's what you want out of world building, but it's also, and I use this metaphor from Lord of the Rings, it's like too little butter spread over too much bread. Like there's not enough world building for you to feel really satisfied. And this book definitely had the pacing that you would expect to see more like in a thriller or a Dan Brown book than you would normally expect to see in some kind of a fantasy setting. But like I said, it was all very good world building, what bits that we got to see of it. And I definitely am hoping that this is going to be revisited and expanded upon in the next book. But like a pacing example, you know, if we were trying to take the hero's journey kind of plot mechanics and apply it to the story, we're at like step 4 or 5 in the hero's journey where like the hero loses their first mentor and really has to go out after this first tragedy and has to go out on this adventure. And that happens like 10 pages into the book. I feel like it was really fast, and it never slowed down.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I want to be like, who read this and was your beta reader and wasn't like, I want so much more? Or conversely, like, who in this office was editing this and was like, no, we can make this into one book? I want to like shake them. I think this is her first book, though. I'm going to double check that.
And I will say that one of the things that this book benefits from is the action-oriented pacing is very well structured. Everything keeps building. Nothing really slows down. It is exactly the kind of pacing that you expect to see in a thriller book. And, I mentioned to Brie earlier this week that one of the things that would have really suffered with this book is if in the middle of it, she decided that she was going to do a little bit more world building at one point, because it would have absolutely destroyed the tension that she'd been building progressively and faster as the book went on.
Yeah, and this is her first book, which I'm never sure how much to chalk up things like pacing issues to it, but I just want to be like, this was fantastic. You clearly thought through all of these relationships. Like the entire first part, well, not the entire first part, the first, say, 30 or 40 pages is establishing Zay's relationship with essentially her mentor, right? This woman who's teaching her how to fight. And we don't get nearly enough of that, right? We don't have any kind of understanding of the kind of larger integration on how that's working with the community at large. Like, there are a lot of kids studying under this woman, and they're under the guise of being seamstresses. And the more important part that we wind up taking out is the way that they interact with the guards, which is fantastic, right? The guards are oppressing them. The guards are literally taxing them to death. And we get to see some of the brutality of the world, but we don't have that interpersonal relationship between her and her mentor that I think it would have given you the Obi-Wan Kenobi moment, right? And I mean, part of it is also just that I'm a sucker for the Obi-Wan Kenobi moment.
Well, you're not wrong, though. Like, she had this great character in this mentor character. She was brilliant. And she had one of the best early twists in the series too, or in the story too.
Yeah.
Because about when Zélie and her brother are getting ready to start out on this quest, you find out that her mentor is actually what used to be a wizard, right? Like, she was alive when magic was taken away, and the only reason that people don't know that she had magic herself was because she had cancer and her hair had fallen out. And like, this is this great like twist, haha. Like, I've pulled this over the guards for all these years. I've pulled it over all you girls for all these years that I've been helping and teaching. And she has this decent life because of this cancer that took her hair away. And I will also say that one of the neat things about the magic in this story is that it's very both structured and unstructured. And what I mean by that is, magic is divided up into classes that are passed down hereditary lines, and Zélie becomes a spirit walker, or she used death magic, was basically a reaper, yes. And the mentor character could do prophecies, and at different times throughout the whole series, they would allude to these other types of magic that used to be around. And they all have names, and they all have like their specific domain. Like, there's a group that wields fire, there's a group that causes sickness, there's a group that communes with the dead, there's a group that looks into the minds of others. And we get this very small, very narrow window into the magic, because Zélie has the death magic, and Anan only has this mind magic. And though we'll meet a few magic users as the book goes on, as they slowly start bringing magic back to some people, we still don't really get a chance to revel in the richness of that magic. But then the unconstructed part of this comes from the very loose way that all of these magics seem to be able to be wielded. I mean, the way they described the fire wielders always sounded to me more like a guy with a flamethrower than a guy with some kind of magical powers, because it was just that kind of sudden and free form. And Zélie and Anan's magical powers throughout the book have some praying to some deities who are all supposed to be patrons for the different types of magic, but it's all still very kind of structured. It leaves you up to the imagination as to what they'll be able to do in future books.
I think my other okay. So I think my other kind of problem with this is almost just that I didn't get to see enough of the girls together. For a big part of it, Zayla is kind of not quite off on her own, but like there's a lot of the, like Jacob was talking about earlier, like the force Skyping going on. So you don't actually see them interact too much. And when they do interact, it's very, very interesting, but it almost winds up taking a back seat to them interacting with their brothers. And I mean, while I liked both of the brother characters, neither of them was as interesting as the girls. Neither.
Absolutely, I 100% agree. Though I do think it was interesting that both Amari, who's the princess again, and then Zayle's brother, whose name I can never remember.
Anon.
No, Zayle's brother. Yeah, well, we're just going to keep saying Zayle's brother. They were the non-magic users in the crowd, and they both had very different reactions to magic and this quest and everything that was going on. Zayle's brother was he was a sports ball player of some kind, and he knew that he had to take care of his sister, and he thought this whole quest was crazy. And at several times in this book, he wanted everybody to go back. Let's go back. Let's go back. Let's just find somewhere to hide and put our heads down. This isn't our fight. This is too dangerous for us. And then Amari, who is this princess that ran away, that started this whole thing by running away from her father, carrying these priceless relics that were the keys, the MacGuffins, to bringing magic back to this world. She sacrificed everything that she was because a friend of hers died at the very beginning of the book. And she went on this long quest that was possibly the most driven to do the quest out of the lot of them to see it done.
Yeah, no, and I think part of what's interesting to me is that kind of the idea of obligation that's tied up in that, right? Zayle's brother very much feels that he is obligated to take care of her, despite the fact that, as far as he's concerned, Zayla is reckless and she just kind of goes into things without a plan and like is constantly screwing up, even just at some point just because she can't keep her mouth shut, right? So he's definitely like the Sokka of the relationship. If you're an Avatar: The Last Airbender fan, yes, definitely thumbs up to Avatar: The Last Airbender. But you know, Amari is very much concerned with obligation as well. To her, and this is kind of the awesome part about her character, is that she sees her obligation not to Zayla or to anyone else in particular, but as kind of this role of righting what she sees as her father's wrongs that she didn't know about until she'd really kind of escaped and gone out into this world, until she'd literally seen one of her best friends being killed by her father. And so the idea that your obligation to your family versus your obligation to society is one that wars throughout the book, and I think is used to really great effect.
Yeah, and it's one of those wars that's very easy to get unbalanced. It's very easy to make it seem preachy or make it seem insensitive, but this hit it right on. It was pitch perfect the whole time. And to be honest, I always thought that Zayle's brother was more like Bolin from Korra, but I think we're on the same page there. But like Bree said, the girls were the more interesting characters, and honestly, they had the best chemistry with each other, they had the best interaction, and they had the best growth with each other. Because when Zayle and Amari meet at the beginning, Amari basically bumps into Zayle, accidentally gives her magic as a result of bumping into her, begs for help without really telling Zayle who she is, and basically becomes like she's the R2-D2 in the story analogy, right? Like she shows up with this quest that Zélie didn't necessarily want anything to do with. She was just trying to sell some fish. And then so they go from this very antagonistic, very combative relationship in the beginning to, I think, having the most emotionally connected relationship towards the end of the book. And Zélie is kind of painted as reckless, but I think one of the interesting parts about her character was the adults in her life at the beginning. Because in my mind, it'd be very easy for some parents trying to raise a child in an oppressive regime just getting so fed up with Zélie and so upset that she couldn't keep her mouth shut or she couldn't keep her head down. But her mentor and her father character are both supportive. They're both they both try to build her up, even while they're trying to tell her in the kindest, most gentlest way possible, like, you've got to keep your head down. Like, come on.
Mama Agba, who is her mentor, I think really exemplifies that. Like, there's a scene at the very beginning in that first, again, 40 pages where we see Zélie getting in kind of a tussle with the guards, and Mama Agba like kind of whaps her upside the head, but doesn't actually tell her like what you were doing was morally wrong, or like it was much more of a, I wish you would think this through, than it was your impulses and your heart are in the wrong place. I would say I'm not so big a fan of her father. Her father, from my perspective, seemed to have just checked out once her mother had passed. And so to me, he was a little bit absent and kind of struck me as being not unsupportive, but almost not present enough to be supportive or not supportive. It is when they decide to go on the quest, right? When Mama Agba says like, yes, do this thing, bring back magic for the world, that I think her father actually steps up and is like, yes, go do this thing. Like, clearly you were being called by the gods. And that for me was a big moment for him, but I don't know that I would call him terribly supportive.
I kind of read that a little differently in that they make it clear that there's something wrong with her dad. And it could just be he's checked out, but I kind of read it as he was sick or he was injured or he was starting to lose his memory. Because one of their first interactions with him is Zélie's brother being upset with Zélie because the father kind of just wandered off and was fishing in the river when he wasn't supposed to be. And Zélie's brother had to jump into the river and save him. And so, while Bree's right, he has definitely checked out in some way. I'm not sure if it's intentional in any way on the father's part, but I could be just reading that differently, or reading more into it than is there.
No, I think that's fair, because there's definitely an implication that he is somehow not entirely present. Again, that particular scene, it's that they have been not just like trying to keep an eye on him, but literally someone in the house with him 24 hours a day, every day. And they talk about how the two kids switch off. So there's clearly something not quite right. It is something that does not get explained. And I'm wondering if it's something that will be brought up again, or if it's just kind of like a plot thread that we're not going to see. So that'll be interesting. We also don't necessarily get explicit confirmation that Mama Agba is dead. We get
more alive. It's very ambiguous. More alive. And I think all of this ties back to, I mean, like the confusion about this character and Mama Agba's, like all of this ties back to, I think, more of a pacing issue rather than any, I want to leave threads open for the next book, because it's very clear when Adeyemi was doing that. And that was the cliffhanger of this book, is a very clear, I've got places to go with this story. Boom.
The cliffhanger is so good. The cliffhanger is so good. I thought that the book had just like stopped. I was like, what? Which is not a feeling I get very often. Huh?
I thought I was missing pages.
I've heard that actually a couple times from a couple of different people. And it is literally like builds you up, gets you right there. And in any other book, right, because the pacing would be different, you would get the rest of that story and you just you don't get it. She's got you on the hook.
Yeah, I think again though, like this is where that pacing played into a strength of the book. It made the cliffhanger so much more emotive. Because even right before that, like it was still building to that moment. There was not, I feel like, a climax moment in this book where things then spent some time slowing down, right? Like it just got to the climax and then book two, summer next year, right? Like, or whatever.
What you do to me, Adeyemi, what you do to me. I think the only other thing that I can think that like really gets under my skin is that there is a third female character who seems like she's going to play a part, and we just don't get any. We don't get anything for her, and it felt like a punch to the gut. My cat is trying to knock over all the things on my table because he sucks.
So honestly, this again goes back to the pacing issues. Like, I'm going to paint a real quick, like, the story of this thing, right? Like, you learn of the setting. You learn that there's a group of magical people being oppressed. Suddenly, Zélie has magic. Suddenly, she's on the run from the guards. Suddenly, she has to get to a temple where she's going to learn how to bring back magic. Then they're running from the temple to cross the desert to a gladiatorial arena where they have to fight other people to be able to get this other component to bring back the magic. Then they're running from the guards again. Then they're running from Anan again. And then all of a sudden, there's now this rebel faction, which is where Bree's other female character comes into play, of some people that had already had the artifact that Amari had at the very beginning of the book. So there were some magic users that were already organized in a camp. The main character, or the main person in that group, Zu, was great. But I really felt like all of the characters in that were people that we were going to start to see. And
right?
So Amari then brings magic to this whole group of people. Then they're fighting the guards again. Then they're running through the woods. Then they run into a cave. Then they meet pirates. And I'm like, at this point, pirates? Really? There are pirates in this book now? Then they're racing across the sea to get to the place where they do the ceremony. And then they do the ceremony, and there's this big fight between all of the people, basically.
But maybe the ceremony didn't work. We don't know.
Right, because the way that we set up the epilogue is ceremony happens, Zélie blacks out, and then the epilogue book, or chapter, if you want to call it a chapter, is like Zélie wakes up, cliffhanger, done. Like, mic drop, and I'm out.
By the way, if and when you read this, you have to read the epilogue, because otherwise it just kind of has an end, and you don't get that it's hinting towards another book. I would hope that you would know, because on the spine it's like whatever the name of the series is going to be, number one. But I am quite often oblivious to those things. You have to read the epilogue. Oh my god. Oh, Jacob's gonna show you. Oh no, wait. Jacob has Into the Drowning Deep, which is what we wanted to talk about next. No, wait. Oh no. I'm bad at seeing the things. But yeah, no,
I'm muting my echoey mic. If this is I didn't see that on the spine of mine.
Oh, maybe it's just because I read it on ebook, and so it might have been one of the things that popped up on my ebook copy that just doesn't translate.
I have a fun Barnes & Noble exclusive edition, which I have to say had a real funny thing at the very end of the book, which I'll show you real quick. I mean, it has like an annotated map, which fine, whatever. It had a chapter from the book as annotated by Adeyemi. So
that's amazing.
Notes from that chapter, and she picked one of her favorites. And it's got little sketches and talks about the food, and it gives you a neat window into her mind. And
that's amazing.
It shows that she was thinking a lot about these world building elements that we've been talking about missing.
Oh my gosh. That's really cool. I didn't know that. I wouldn't have known that because, of course, I got the ebook edition because I couldn't wait. I was at my office and about to have lunch, and I was like, no, going to read this now. Yeah, I'm just really interested to see what she does going forward with this series, because, like I said, she's clearly thought about this so much. she's set it up for this really interesting story. We don't know what's going to happen. I'm not entirely sure what the end point of this series is going to be, which I feel like a lot of times when I start a series, I know where we're going, right? I know point A and I know point Z. I don't know. I'm really intrigued. I don't think that it's coming out for a good another year. Yeah.
That's unfortunate. But like, I get what you're saying about, I don't really know where this is going either. We mentioned this earlier. This feels like it could have been 3 books. It feels like in other fantasy writers, this would have been 3 books, just because of how much happens and how much world building goes on here. And like, it clearly starts off with like, here's this big quest. Like, this is a world changing quest. And like, normally with a fantasy epic, like that's the whole epic, right? Like, we're trying to stop the Dark Lord, whatever. Like, we have to stop Emperor Palpatine. Like, there's this whole huge goal, and it's already completed. Maybe, like, we don't exactly know how the ritual went, because Zele, being Zele, just kind of winged it, which I thought was great and super in character.
It was very in character, and it was even really in character for the way that she wakes up in the epilogue and kind of is looking around to try to figure out what happened. She has no clue if this is going to work at all. And like, if it doesn't work, she's screwed over every magi, they're called diviners, which is the people who could potentially have magic. Like, she has screwed them all over. And she's just like, well, did it work, guys? Question mark.
To her credit, she asks about her friends first,
which is nice. Like,
I mean, it's nice.
Yeah. So yeah, it was real fun to read. I'm really interested to see where she goes next. My cat keeps trying to climb in my lap because he's a cuddle butt, and he is bad at walking, so he's not good at not staying all of the things.
My cat's not really sure what's going on. She sees a bunch of books and the computer and the talking and the tea kettle and everything, and has decided she's just going to stay away and stare at me.
Mm-hmm. So as we both had finished Children of Blood and Bone, Jacob finished first, and he texted me. He was like, "Now I'm going to start the new Myra Grant book. Did you know she's Shannon McGuire and she wrote a mermaid book?" And I was like, I did know that. I literally had just put it on my desk at work to read for the following lunch. Yeah, see, I have mine without the cover without the dust cover, because I prefer to read my books while they're naked.
I put this on so I'd be all dressed up and fancy for the pot thing.
Yeah. So I'm like maybe 40 pages in. Yeah, not even. And I am really enjoying it so far. That's gonna be a fun one. It's about a film crew that goes to film like they're essentially the Sci-Fi Channel, right? And they're doing like a Ghost Hunters but for mermaids. And then they go on this ship tour, and we know right from the get-go that everyone dies. Right? It's like Ghost Hunters meets My Roanoke Nightmare but for mermaids. I'm loving it so far, but it's no surprise that I love Shannon McGuire. I find her just really compelling and engaging. I'm not such a big fan of when she writes the Toby Day books, because they're a little bit Buffy-esque for me. I love Buffy, but they're a little on the Buffy-esque side. But I really like her writing style.
Yeah, I was surprised that she was writing under a pen name, and she's definitely in this book discusses scientific concepts and no real fantasy elements to the story whatsoever, outside of mermaids. But the characters, they're great Shannon characters, right? Like, they're the perfect kind of risk-taking characters that she likes to make, which I've always felt makes her books, Buffy-esque or not, a lot more engaging, because she picks character types that we don't normally see in fiction, either in print or in movie or in TV, that kind of the oddballs, the screwballs, the forgotten. One of my favorite sets of characters from this book, and I don't know if you've gotten a chance to meet them, is she has a trio of sisters, and two of them are twins who are deaf. And they still do science and still go on this adventure, and they're great characters. But I mean, they're three great characters out of 20 great characters in this book.
Yeah, I basically love everything about everything Seanan McGuire ever writes. Mostly, like, I come away from every time I read one of her books, I come away from it and I think, like, God, I'd love to go and hang out with Seanan McGuire. Like, I want to go and see, like, she has like 5 Maine Coons in her house and like seems so awesome. And like her mom seems real cool. She tweets about her mom all the time. I love it.
So I was definitely more prepared for this book with the tea than anything else because I have a little submarine tea strainer and my shark teacup. But if you're only 40 pages in, I don't want to spoil anything for you.
I know, I'm sorry. I got distracted at work when I was reading over lunch because that's when I do a lot of my reading. And I read the first half of Penrick's Fox by Lois McMaster Bujold. It is the only one out of the series so far that I have not read. Thank God, because I turned away after book 2 for like what felt like a minute, and she'd had 5 new novellas, and I was like, "What did you do with all your time?"
Probably gave me shit because I haven't read any of them. So I have to get to that.
They're so good. I love Penrick.
Right now, I'm in the middle of Elizabeth Moon's Cold Welcome, which I have to say, for her return to science fiction with a character that's an admiral in a big old space navy, I'm halfway through this book and they haven't left an ice island. So that wasn't what I was expecting, but I've been enjoying it.
Yeah, that's funny because that actually, there's an Elizabeth Moon book that I read with Rachel from Colonnati, who some of you who are watching might know because she's amazing. And the main character basically like never leaves this one little like 5 mile by 5 mile stretch of land. Like it is again about like a woman who is in an army situation and like doing training and stuff, and like she basically stays in the training camp for most of the first book, like almost entirely the first book. The part that she is not in the training camp is the very beginning when she is going to the training camp. So I'm actually not terribly surprised to hear that. Yeah. So other than that, I'm kind of up in the air as to what I will read. I have to decide for tomorrow because I'm going to do a Friday reads because I've been bad about not doing those in time. I've been really bad about doing a lot of things lately. My work busy season is like literally the last 2 weeks I have not gotten to sit down while I'm at work. So I have come home and instead of reading, I've like plopped down and watched YouTube videos and done other stuff.
I mean, I know what your job is. I can't blame you for that. But I have to say, I'm always impressed that you can let yourself get out of the immersion of a book when you're doing it that fast on a Friday to tweet about things that are happening in the book. Like I always, if I get that absorbed into a book, I'm just going to finish that damn thing cover to cover.
Oh, well, I just want to like shout at somebody like, "Oh my God, did you just figure out this? What happened? Did you see it?" And since, you know, you're not there reading next to me, I have to do the next best thing, which is to tweet to the world about it and hope someone answers me back. Sometimes they do. When I tweeted, I live tweeted reading Milo Yiannopoulos' Dangerous. I got a lot of responses on that.
I laughed so hard reading those tweets.
Yeah.
Honestly, I have to give you more props for actually just powering through that sad sack of mediocrity.
Oh, I can power through some stuff. With screenshots, I've got the receipts on that one.
I don't know if that's something that you should be proud of. Like that's, I don't know. Maybe you should have just shoplifted that or something. Kids don't steal things, but
yeah, probably. Yeah, so anyway, for next week, I'm deciding after I finish Into the Drowning Deep between Bruja Born, which is Zoraida Cordova's second book. I really liked her first one. This is the Brooklyn Brujas series, which is about, it's basically Charmed, but in Brooklyn and with teenage Latinas. And so it's kind of fantastic. And then I have In Other Lands by Sarah Rees Brennan, which actually is one of the books that I think Sean McGuire has talked about how reading this, which is essentially a mermaid book as well, got her to write her mermaid book. So I'm maybe going to pick this one up depending on how into the mermaids I'm feeling.
I don't know that I'm feeling enough into the mermaids that a 35-year-old man needs to go buy another mermaid book. But I definitely read the characters from that book again. I'll be reading Gods, Monsters, and the Lucky Peach by Kelly Robson after I finish this Elizabeth Moon book. But I'm sure I'll have to figure out something for Sunday because I'll be done with both of those by then.
I'm going to put Jacob's Twitter handle in the information bar. You should tweet at him to read Penric. I've been trying for months to get him to read Penric, like on and off, and he always ignores me. But Lois McMaster Bujold lives in my area. You can come and visit me and we can go to the best bookstore in the world and get you like all of the signed editions. So you should do this.
Well, I'm going to be up there, I'm sure sometime.
Yeah. Anyways, guys, thanks for joining us. This was really fantastic and I had a really good time.
Yeah,
so
definitely do this again.
Yes, we will be doing this again. Tweet at me what books you think we should read for next month. We're trying to think through doing this potentially monthly. So hope you guys are all having a fantastic reading week. You guys know the drill. Comment, like, subscribe, go to the Twitters and follow us. And we'll talk to you later.
Most
Bye.
of all, keep reading.
Yep. Bye.